So for our online students, our lab today, we're doing the ABO, RH, and we're going to carry it all the way through the week D. So we're going to have our tubes for our anti-serum, our forward. I like to just label them A, B, A, comma, B, D for our anti-D, and then DC for our D control. So we're going to have those tubes. And then for our reverse typing, where you have your A1 cells and B cells, I like to just put RA and RB for my reverse. Alright, and now this is, we've already made our patient cell suspension, so this is the patient that we're testing. Here's the plasma, and here is our anti-serum. We do not have our order for reagent cells in, so we made off of our own blood. We have a student that's type A and then I'm type B, so we made our own reagent cells. Normally you'd have reagents in your rack here, but these are going to serve as our reagent A cells and B cells. Alright, so you always want to put your anti-serum in your tube first. So I'm going to put 1 drop of anti-A. One drop of anti-B. One drop of anti-A, comma B. Then for the anti-D, I like to put 2 drops. D control, 2 drops. And you always want to put your source of your antibodies first. So when you're forward typing, that's your reagent antibodies. Okay, for your reverse typing, that is your patient plasma. So I'm going to put 2 drops of patient plasma in each of those. Okay. Now I'm ready for red blood cells to be added. Okay, so for my reverse, that is my reagent A cells and B cells. So like we said, we made them. So this is going to be my A cells, which would normally be a tube like this, but it's my A cells. And my B cell. Okay. And for the patient that we're testing their blood type, okay, that goes with your forward typing anti-serum. Okay. Then we just gently resuspend and put in our centrifuge. I'm going to need a little balance tube. Some saline there, make my little balance tube. I'm going to make sure that's pushed all the way down. Okay, and then spin that for 15 to 20 seconds. Now bring me my paper where I'm writing the reactions down on. Okay, so then we're just going to read for our reactions. Okay, so if you can get in on here, this is our A tube. Okay, and if y'all want to bring me an agglutination viewer, I'll show them what it looks like within an agglutination viewer as well. We'll just unplug that one and plug that in. Alright, so once we have read that, okay, so I am going to put today's date on my sheet here. This is Amber's blood. So my A cell tube was negative. So I'm going to record that under my anti-A. Okay. And my B, okay, you can get to where you can see. We're looking in the mirror with this agglutination viewer, and you can really kind of see how these negative cells are just flowing off. Okay, and so you do that on negative tubes until that entire cell button has dissipated. So that's a negative for B. Okay, I'm going to do these two at the same time. So this is our A, B, and our D. Okay, and we're doing a week D lab today. So this patient, or should I say student, I'm so used to saying patient, but this is one of our students' blood, okay, is Rh negative. So this is the A, B, which you would expect to be negative since the others are. And then my D control here as well. Get my pin out of the way so y'all don't see that. So my D and my D control are both negative. Okay, so anti-D. Okay, and when y'all looking on here, this forward typing, I have my D and I have my D control. Okay, all negative. Now my reverse A and B, I'm going to put up here together. They are both positive. This reverse A, that is a 4+ positive. This B is a 3+. See how there's some that have come off. So over here on this, my reverse, I'm not doing A2. My A was 4+ and my B was 3+. Okay. So at this point, since we're doing the week D, these are going to go into the incubator for 15 minutes into our cell block. So we're going to just walk that over here. I'm going to put it with these right here. And we will be back in 15. Alright, so it's been 15 minutes. So these have incubated for 15 minutes. So now what we've got to do is we've got to wash them 3 times. Okay, and I won't make y'all watch the full procedure. We'll pause and come back. But what we're going to do is we're going to fill these tubes about 3/4 with saline. Okay, and then we are going to centrifuge them for 1 minute. They have been spun down for 1 minute. So you see the cell button of all the red blood cells got stuck to the bottom of the tube. So when we go to dump these, we're going to put those up to the ceiling so that way the water flows away from them and doesn't wash all of our red blood cells out. So we're just going to dump. And after the first and second wash, it's going to be the same procedure. We're going to dump, turn it over, that saline comes back down. We're going to resuspend those red blood cells in that saline that dripped back down. And we're going to do the procedure again. Okay, so this is our second wash. Okay, and then we'll spin that for 1 minute. And we're going to dump again, but this is going to be a little bit different after the second wash or after the third wash. This is just the second, so nothing different from what I'm doing now and after the second wash. So then we'll skip ahead to the third wash. Okay, so again, the exact same thing after this first wash, spin for 1 minute, dump, resuspend the saline, refill, spin and wash for 1 minute again. That's your second wash. So the difference is going to be after the third wash. So for this video, we'll jump ahead and go to our third wash. Okay, so we did our second wash. Now this is our third wash. So the difference after the third wash is when we come dump these. Okay, we're again, same thing for dumping. We're going to keep those buttons up to the ceiling. We're going to dump, but I'm not going to turn them back over. If you see this saline that's around the lip, you can see that saline around the lip. That's what we don't want to run back down. So we are going to tap it and get that off. And then you get this dry cell button where that saline didn't drip back down. So this is where we are going to add our anti-human globulin reagent. Okay, this is the IAT phase of testing. So I have my anti-IgG, which is my anti-human globulin reagent. And we're going to put 2 drops of that in each of these tubes. And then you're going to resuspend. And we're going to centrifuge that for 15 seconds. make sure my centrifuge stops. Okay, now we are going to read our tubes at the AHG phase of testing. And you want to be sure when you are resuspending tubes, you're just gently twirling and leaning. As you can see, those are coming off nice and negative. And you want to do that until that whole cell button is back resuspended. If it's negative. If it's positive, I mean, you're not going to get them back resuspended. The negatives, you want to do it until they're completely resuspended, and you can kind of see that tail coming off on that negative. Okay, so those are both negative tubes at the AHG phase of testing. So what we got to do now is anytime you have a negative at AHG, this is where you add your check cells. Okay, so I made some reagent check cells here since we haven't received our reagents in yet. I made some of my own. So these would normally be in a nice reagent bottle labeled check cells. Okay, and check cells are IgG coded cells. So they are red blood cells that have an IgG antibody already attached to the antigens on the surface of their cells. Okay, and this reagent that we added is an anti-IgG. So this is an antibody, okay, an anti-IgG. Okay, it's an antibody that reacts to human IgG antibodies. Okay, so when these are negative, to confirm that they're a true negative, meaning that the anti-D that's in this tube did not attach to this patient's cells, okay, we want to know that the AHG is working and it's not a false negative, that is a true actual Rh negative patient. Okay, so we're going to take our check cells, which are cells that have the antibody, have an IgG antibody already coded to them, and we're going to add that in there, 1 drop in each, and then we're going to gently resuspend and centrifuge. So what should happen now is the antibody that's attached to the surface of these red cells should react with this anti-human globulin, giving us a positive reaction, letting us know that our reagent did work, and then we can call it a true negative. Okay, so I'm going to stick that in there, centrifuge for 15. While that's centrifuging, I'm going to write my results here. So for my weak D with the AHG, it was negative. For my D control with the weak D with my AHG reagent, it was negative. And these columns are going to be my check cells, my Coombs control cells. That's what the CCC stands for, which is essentially check cells. Okay. Now when we read for agglutination, okay, again, gently twirl, lean, I'm getting a positive reaction. Okay. So now that positive reaction tells me my AHG reagent was working, so that negative reaction I just recorded for my patient was a true negative because my AHG worked. So that's what that's checking, and those are, I would actually call those like a 3+. So I'm going to come over here for my control cells, 3+, 3+. Right, so when we look at this interpretation here, okay, with this patient, our forward typings were negative. Okay, for our anti-D and our D control, they were negative. Then our weak D test, after we washed them, added our AHG, negative. So that's where you're looking for your interpretation of your patient. So this one is an O negative. Don't let it be confused with these controls, because these being positive just confirms that these are a true negative. So my patient's ABO interpretation is O negative. Now, if they were an actual weak D patient, then with the AHG, this would have been positive. Okay, and then we wouldn't have had to do the control cells, because if this is positive, you don't do this step. D control should always be negative. Okay, so if they were an actual, say, an O weak D positive, your reactions would have looked like this. Okay, and then the reverse reactions would have been the same. And then that would have been an O positive. Sometimes you see it written out as an ODU, signifying that they are an actual weak D positive patient. So that's where that difference would have been if they were weak D versus a true D negative.